We actually get the names named in these documents. So let's go ahead and go through the timeline from the FBI. 2016 was an extremely busy year. We start out with February. The DOJ indicated that they would not be supportive of an FBI investigation. Back on February 17th, McCabe learned that the confidential human source who possibly had information on the matter, he said that he directed that there no overt investigative steps were allowed to be taken in the Clinton Foundation. This goes without his approval, they said. Then we go back to March 1st. Deputy AG Sally Yates directed the Arkansas office to shut it down. They went through and said that they ordered her federal prosecutors to shut it down. In June of that year, we have the infamous tarmac meeting between Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton, and they were both talking about, we were just talking about our grandkids and golfing. No, what they were actually talking about is the Hillary email server investigation. Then Comey announced that the FBI is contemplating its investigation of the email scandal. Comey greenlights the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. And then we go through and look at the DC and Little Rock investigations consolidated and we're overseen right there in New York City, which is important because then we fast forward to Maureen Comey, the daughter of James Comey, began working at the SDNY field office for the U.S. attorney. And we go through, Chris, and there are so many different points now that we know where the Clinton Foundation, McCabe is recusing himself of all of this, but we know the names now that go along with all of the data points that we have been looking at for so long.
We do. And when you combine it with some of the things that were released over the last few weeks by the Trump administration, if you come up with that Loretta Lynch meeting, and you come up on the fact that the FBI actually interviewed Loretta Lynch, an FBI agent who was later exposed as being pretty partisan for the Democrats winning in general, and certainly anti-Trump, came away from that meeting and reported to the FBI, hey, it's really weird. When I talked to her about colluding with the Clinton campaign, she didn't deny it. Like, you'd think that she would either say no comment, I don't recall, or say I deny it, but she didn't. And they thought that was weird. Now, this is an example, I think, to what Matt was saying, of the FBI does serve presidents in a way that J. Edgar Hoover did very faithfully, especially Lyndon B. Johnson and before that. But they don't actually serve all presidents. They're not going to serve Donald Trump, that's for sure. They're not going to serve someone who threatens anything about the way that they actually conduct business in any way, or that they think is outside of the pale, beyond the pale. They're only going to serve Hillary Clinton. And this is them covering their butts. And now we have the names, we have the emails, we have the timestamps of when they were saying, all right, wrap it up. We're not going to follow any leads on this massive nonprofit that took hundreds of millions of dollars from countries and oligarchs and corrupt people around the planet only when the Clintons were in power. And funny enough, all that money dried up as soon as they weren't in power. And the Clinton Global Initiative is basically defunct. They weren't going to look into that because they were covering their butts. And then they tried to do that double cover of the butt where James Comey bizarrely came out and said, we're not going to press charges, as if it's James Comey and the FBI's job to press charges as opposed to the DOJ's against Hillary Clinton. And then they attacked her and slandered her and all this and that. By the way, they were totally right. So I don't know if that's exactly slander or libel or whatever you want to call it. But made all these charges, said that they weren't going to pursue them. And then, by the way, at the exact same time, they're opening Operation Crossfire Hurricane into another candidate for office. This was kind of the assuredness of the DC scene right before that election, the confidence. It's later been exposed that there was actually a huge amount of paranoia and freakouts in the Clinton campaign in the days leading up to the election that canceled the fireworks. They were worried about that whole thing. They knew that things were going off the rails and they could potentially lose, but they didn't tell the rest of Washington or the rest of the world, which all expected things to just go as part of the plan, just according to the narrative, the end of history narrative that they had constructed and lived on. And they didn't think that there was any shot that Donald Trump was going to actually show up there. I mean, I remember reading Political Playbook the morning of the election, and a whole section of it was devoted to what the catering companies were for different newsrooms in Washington and New York to feed their reporters that night during the election, where they covered the inevitability. We got a copy at our old newsroom of Madam President, that famous magazine cover that turned out that was shipped prematurely, and all these stores had it in boxes ready to release, and it turned out, whoops, there is no Madam President. It turns out that Donald Trump is the president. We have to redo this whole thing. This was part of their assuredness. And of course, you don't want, when you're the director of the FBI and when you're a political lackey and a lightweight like James Comey, to have the new president come in when she is as vindictive as Hillary Clinton is known to be and say, why were you investigating me? Why were you doing this? They tried to have it both ways, while at the same time undermining the Republican Party, undermining MAGA, undermining Donald Trump, and assuming there'd be no consequences. And thank God it's all blown up in their face.
Well, the Clinton Foundation was taking in so much money. Everybody around the world thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president. When she was Secretary of State, they raised $1.2 billion in campaign contributions and donations to the Clinton Foundation, Matt. It's just, if you want to look at what corruption is going to look like, it's that chart right there. You can see that they all thought, oh, this is absolutely going to happen. And they gave you 1.2 billion reasons why they thought that was going to be the case.
Yeah, this has been going on for a long time, but it has gotten progressively worse over time. And what we're talking about here is, really elite corruption. How do politicians become rich? How do these people who actually don't have real jobs, become wealthy? And there was a time in America where you would have something like the old dailies in Chicago, who some rough around the edges stuff going on there. You could say technically there was some corruption, but there wasn't the sense of hogging it, as Plunkett of Tammany Hall, an old great book about American politics. When you start to hog it, right, then people start to notice, and people have been hogging it for a very long time. So if you look at that chart again, what you're seeing is an obvious reaction to power, right? You're seeing there's a dip, and the dip is there for a reason. This thing gets off the ground ostensibly to provide funds for the Clinton Library, which would be a normal thing that a nonprofit could do, and it becomes a conduit, a bucket in which you can throw money at power. And when she's going to run again, that's what a lot of people are doing from throughout the world, including from Russia, right? And it's, these people look shamelessly into the camera and just say, it's okay when we do it, right? And this has been going on for a while. I mean, the Clintons presaged the Obamas, who get an incredible deal from Netflix for whatever it was, $80 million, I believe. It was close to $100 million. To produce a bunch of entertainment specials, entertainment projects, given their wealth of experience in that area. I mean, so this has been going on for a while now, and it just gets worse and worse every year. And here you actually had a potential investigation of this thing, right? That was immediately shut down pretty fast.
Well, let's not just focus on. Go ahead.
I love that reference to Plunkett of Tammany Hall, Matt. I assume that's what you're referencing there. That phenomenal book. If there are two books to read but to understand American politics, it's Plunkett of Tammany Hall and The Last Hurrah, which is a fiction about a Boston mayor. Honest graft. Just a wonderful time back when my people had our own ethnic political machine outside of just Amtrak conductors, and we're actually and toll booth collectors, which have gone the way of the dinosaur as well. The good old days. I miss them.
And the point of Plunkett of Tammany Hall is he is sort of a corrupt, technically, right, politician from back in the day, but he's explaining, they make a little money, they stay in power, but they get things done. And when people want to hog it, right, when they want to hog it, it's all about me. I'm going to get an $80 million deal. I'm going to have $40 million from the Russians going to my foundation. I'm going to go to Davos and all this sort of thing. They're not doing the job anymore. They're not actually trying to provide any good or service, which old Plunkett was,
I was going to say, let's not let Hillary Clinton have all of the fun today, because, the rest of the Obama administration is in on this, too. We get another tweet from DNI Tulsi Gabbard saying that we have newly declassified top secret emails back from 2016 where, everybody was out there complying with President Obama's order to create the manufactured intel about Russia. And then we get to see that NSA Director Mike Rogers was warning people, hey, guys, we might not have sufficient evidence and all the time that backs this claim, right? We aren't fully comfortable, he said, saying that they have enough time to review this. But you guys, they're not going to let this go to waste. They're like, no. we have a narrative that we need to go fulfill. So whether you are comfortable with it or you think you have enough time to do this is irrelevant, Matt.
Yeah, and I mean, not only is it relevant, I mean, this is a travesty, right? They don't have time to properly vet information that involves like the highest levels of the highest game in the world, and we're just going to keep going. And I think what's particularly egregious with Clapper, who is another one of these people who, as far as I'm concerned, should be in prison. His email in the highest tradition of "that's our story and we're sticking to it." It's essential that we're all on the same page. You got to be part of the team. This has to team sport is the word he uses, and he's using it with the kind of authority and veiled threat that people will recognize in their workplace. Like, you got to be part of the team on this one, buddy. And that's what they're saying to Mike Rogers, head of the freaking NSA, about this information. So you can see the little bullying cabal, pushing people around here.
Yeah, Bedford, it's all just one big team sport out there in Washington, D.C., at least as the Obama administration was concerned.
No, it truly is. It is a team sport. And Republicans and Democrats are both members of that team. At least they were. And after Trump was elected, most Republicans still were members of that team, that insular team. I remember looking at the News Guard Board of Governors, which is a mixture of former heads of NATO and former Republican secretaries of Homeland Security and former Democrat this and that. So who's who? And they would always pop up on my screen because they were attacking someone for being socially conservative or attacking someone for questioning the COVID narrative, which turned out to be entirely false. So I was curious what brought all of these players together, and what it turned out to be, and what brought the DC together in a bipartisan coalition against Donald Trump, was that the main threat to him was that he was threatening the international order. He was threatening the way the foreign policy was done. Same way that Barry Goldwater did when the FBI helped to try and take him down. He was going to make NATO members pay their dues. He was not going to play by the same rules. He was going to expose corruption. And that was something they absolutely could not abide. Both parties were like that. You didn't see any public protests remotely from Republican senators, for example, when outgoing President Donald Trump was removed from Twitter. Only one Republican senator even sent a private message on that matter to Twitter expressing concern, because they just wished he would go away. And the Senate is basically the last chamber in D.C., which hasn't really caught up because of the 6-year terms. They're pretty isolated from everything, actually, really. And the House of Representatives, though, it's kind of an interesting place where more than half of them at this point came into politics after Donald Trump was already on the national scene. And that's why you start to see such a different change there. But Washington, D.C. itself still wishes they could just blink and make this all go back to the way it used to be, where everyone fought on television, they'd go on Crossfire and duke it out. But in the end of the day, they all just got rich and fat like hogs.
Well said. Well said. I guess as one thought here that I think is important from all this is the fact that President Barack Hussein Obama really bears a lot of the blame here, and he gets away with his name isn't even being talked about this entire week as much as it should be, because at the end of the day, the buck does stop with the commander in chief, and he put all these people in a room and said, we need this. We need this report, and we need it out before January 20th. And that's when I say original sin, right? Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and all their lackeys, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton and all their lackeys got together to tarnish the Trump administration before it even started. And just repeating that over and over again, showing that to people over again is, I think, an important task.
Well, I've been reliably assured that the Obama administration was a scandal-free administration.
Exactly.
There's nothing to see here, Bedford. There's nothing. Everybody was doing things above board in the Obama administration.
Yeah, I think was that the New York Times or the Washington Post that said it was incredible after 8 years, not a single scandal, no guns brought into Mexican cartels that were used to execute people at children's parties or kill Brian Terry, an American agent. There was no IRS scandal. There was none of that. And it turned out that they were actually sitting on one of the biggest scandals in modern American political history. Get out of the way, Teapot Dome.
Yep.
This is so much bigger than all of that. And they just wanted, I remember the Washington Post released a press release after Barack Obama left office saying, we are reconstituting our investigations team now that there's actually a corrupt administration in DC. I thought, gosh, boys, where you been? Where you got all that money and all that prestige, and what do you use it for? Just taking care of each other.
That will be the final word. Bedford, loved it today. Thanks so much.
See you soon.